Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at a sector that really feels like the next frontier. The whole drone and space economy, it's moving fast.
It really is.
And our source material for this deep dive, it's pretty interesting, a pitch deck and an annual report from a company called Satellite Alliance, Inc.
Right.
So our mission for you today is to unpack what they're all about, their vision, figure out their role in this whole burgeoning industry, and take a critical look at the investment opportunity they're putting forward. We'll try to cut through the jargon and the big numbers.
And what jumps out right away from those sources is their take on the current situation. You've got all this amazing innovation happening, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But they describe the industry as, well, surprisingly fragmented, kind of disorganized, actually.
Huh, okay.
Which makes it tough, for the smaller, more agile companies to get the funding they need or scale up or even just deliver their services effectively.
So like good ideas, but trouble connecting the dots.
Exactly. So this deep dive is really about exploring how this one company, Satellite Alliance, plans to be that connector, that bridge, bringing some structure to what they see as a dynamic but maybe slightly chaotic scene.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the potential everyone talks about, it's undeniably huge. The sources, they kick right off talking about the golden age of LEO.
Low Earth orbit, yeah.
Increasingly critical.
Right. And they put a number on the combined drone and space economy, already a $2.1 trillion market. That's staggering.
It is. And they're projecting potentially 3.28x returns over just the next 5 years.
Wow. Okay, that's a number that grabs your attention.
For sure. But, while Golden Age sounds great, the pitch deck quickly pivots to the core problem they want to solve.
Which is?
It's the challenges faced specifically by the micro and small satellite businesses. These little guys, they thrive on being affordable, quick to deploy, versatile for things like, Earth observation or comms.
Yeah, the nimble player. Exactly. But they often hit walls. Funding constraints, obviously. High operational costs. Their satellites have limited payload capacity, power issues, often pretty short operational lives.
Okay.
And a big one, the sources highlight. They often depend on rideshare launches.
So hitching a ride with bigger rockets.
Right. Which means they have very little say over when they launch or their exact orbit. That can be a massive bottleneck if you're trying to innovate quickly.
Okay, so it sounds like this booming industry is definitely ready for, well, maybe not disruption, but perhaps some organization, a central player. How does Satellite Alliance plan to step into that role? What's their big idea?
Their core solution, as they put it, is to provide a comprehensive ecosystem. Think of it like a centralized hub.
A hub?
Yeah, basically a marketplace and a support system rolled into one. It connects the tech providers, the drone and space companies directly with clients who need their services, and also with investors from all over the world.
Okay, connecting all the pieces.
Precisely. Their mission statement is pretty clear. To accelerate agile and affordable commercial space operations, connecting people, innovation, and technology. And their vision is even bigger: to forge an ecosystem that delivers disruptive air and space capabilities to improve both Earth and interplanetary life.
Ambitious.
Very. They even have a mantra: unleashing human ingenuity and discovery.
That definitely sets a tone. The sources use this great analogy to explain it.
Oh, yeah.
They compare now to the dawn of aviation. Remember reading about that? Thousands of independent pilots, everyone scrambling for clients, for investors.
Right, a bit of a Wild West.
Exactly. Satellite Alliance wants to do something similar, but organize it for today's aerospace world.
Yeah.
Bring together what they say are tens of thousands of these independent companies, sort of imposing order on this new frontier.
That's a good way to put it. And they've structured their offerings very deliberately to meet the needs of both sides of that equation.
The tech companies and the investors.
Right. So for their members, that's the tech providers, they're offering critical stuff like help with mission funding, finding sponsorship and advertising deals, prep and investor presentations, managing mission sales.
So the business development side.
A lot of that, yeah. Plus operational support, space drone operations, launch and flight ops, and even ongoing education and information sharing. It's quite comprehensive.
Okay. And for the other side? For the investors.
For them, it's about access and insight. Things like curated space deal flow, so vetted opportunities, in-depth investment reviews, an advisory board position, potentially, and even, interestingly, access to something called the Tesla School of Space Technologies.
The Tesla School of Space Technologies. Okay, that's a name. What exactly is that? Do they elaborate?
They don't go into deep detail in these sources, but it seems positioned as a unique perk for investors. perhaps offering specialized knowledge or training related to the space tech sector they're investing in. Adds a bit of exclusivity.
Intriguing. Okay, let's drill down a bit more on the specific services for the members. This is where the ecosystem idea really comes into play, right?
Absolutely. Their membership services are foundational. Access to this big network of industry partners, investors, exclusive events.
Networking opportunities.
Right. Plus shared technical resources, joint marketing efforts, promotional help, and technical consulting. Then they get into some really novel areas, like branding and marketing sales.
How so?
They're actually proposing to sell branding placements, not just on the satellites themselves, but on, like, external fuel tanks, satellite attachments, ground equipment, hangars, facilities, even the member team's apparel.
Wow, okay. Monetizing every surface, basically.
Seems like it. Leveraging visibility. Then there's sponsorship sales, where Satellite Alliance designs and manages whole campaigns for their members.
Gotcha.
They also handle satellite mission sales, so acting as the sales force to market and sell the services their members' microsatellites offer.
Thanks.
And finally, satellite data services. This seems pretty broad, offering ground imagery, handling onboard research tasks, monitoring weather conditions, and across a huge altitude range. They say from 500 feet above ground level, like drones, all the way up to hundreds of miles, well into space.
So covering everything from low-flying drones to LEO satellites.
Yeah.
That suggests a really layered capability.
It does, and that range of services points to the kind of technology and operations they need to have underpinning it all.
Right. How do they actually plan to do all this? What's the tech?
Well, the sources talk about varied flight altitudes and different launch types. For instance, they mention wing launch satellites.
Wing launch, like dropped from a plane.
Seems like it. They describe them as NCH-2, capable twice the speed of sound, operating around 45,000 to 50,000 feet, and significantly 100% reusable.
Fully reusable, okay. That usually means lower cost, more flexibility.
Potentially, yeah. Air launch systems often offer that. Then they contrast that with vertical launch satellites. These are described as MACHV, capable 5 times the speed of sound, aiming for much higher altitudes, from 145,000 up to 950,000 feet, for launching into low Earth orbit.
So more traditional rocket launches, but faster.
Faster, higher, yes. But these are only 20% reusable, according to the documents. So a different cost structure, different mission profile.
And they also mention drones and low-altitude stuff.
Yeah, they talk about democratizing space from like 20 feet off the ground up to 250 miles. So really covering that whole spectrum below traditional LEO.
Okay, so they need serious coordination for all these different types of launches and operations.
Absolutely. And that's where their emphasis on launch control operations comes in. They stress how crucial this is, providing the processes, the systems to manage everything safely and efficiently.
Like mission control.
Essentially, yes, and they're putting money behind it. They've earmarked $1.5 million for a dedicated launch and flight control center that all members can use. That signals a pretty serious commitment to infrastructure.
And to make all this complex stuff work together smoothly, I see they're bringing in AI.
Yeah, that's a big piece. The sources highlight a partnership with a company called Versus AI.
Versus AI.
Described as a global leader in cutting-edge AI. The plan is to use their tech to develop advanced operational systems, presumably for coordinating launches, managing satellites, maybe processing data.
Makes sense for managing such a complex system.
And also for recruiting new members. They mention using AI to help classify and bring in members across different levels: professional, expert, and novice.
Interesting. So AI for operations and growth.
Seems that way. And there's a specific budget for it, between $500,000 and $750,000 allocated just for developing this AI tech. It really underscores how central AI is to their whole strategy.
Okay, so you've got this grand vision, complex tech, AI integration. But who's actually steering the ship? You need the right people for something this ambitious.
True.
The sources introduce the executive team. Leading it is Wilhelm Kaschen, the CEO. His background is extensive. Over 40 years in automotive manufacturing, EVs, advanced aviation tech. Been involved in innovation since 1975, including AI and machine learning.
Wow, quite a resume.
Yeah. Then there's Paul Rubio, the president. Different background, 17 years representing and selling private jets. high-end clients.
So experience and branding bespoke solutions for wealthy individuals.
Exactly. Now, applying that to satellite solutions and brand value for Satellite Alliance members, it's an interesting mix.
It is, and the mix gets even more interesting with Dana Rohrabacher as vice chairman.
Rohrabacher, the former congressman.
That's him. Served 30 years in the U.S. House, was apparently a big champion for aviation and space initiatives, and crucially, he authored the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act of 2004.
Oh, okay. That was a key piece of legislation for the commercial space industry, wasn't it?
Absolutely pivotal. It really helped pave the way for companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin in the human spaceflight arena. Having someone with that policy background who literally wrote some of the rules could be incredibly valuable for navigating regulations and, opening doors.
That's a really good point. A blend of deep tech, high-end sales, and policy expertise.
It certainly seems designed to cover a lot of bases.
And their collective vision. They state it pretty boldly. Humans and robots will go to the stars together.
Quite a statement. Which brings us, inevitably, to the financials. How are they funding this grand vision?
Good question. Okay, let's talk money. This is where it gets concrete for potential investors, right?
Always.
Satellite Alliance is looking for a $5 million investment right now, and they've set the company valuation for that round at $20 million.
Okay, $5 on a 20-emmer pre-money, presumably. What's the minimum buy-in?
Minimum investment is $250,000, though they do mention a seed round option. $50,000 gets you in, but at $2 per share, which implies a much lower valuation for that earlier round.
Right, typical structure. And how are they structuring the investment itself? Equity? Debt?
They're flexible. The documents mention convertible notes, SAFEs, or direct equity investments.
Okay, standard early-stage options. For listeners maybe less familiar, SAFEs, simple agreements for future equity and convertible notes, are ways to invest now without setting a firm valuation yet. The money converts into shares later, often at a discount. It's common when things are still taking shape.
Good clarification. Now, the projections, this is where it gets really eye-popping.
Let's hear them.
Projected revenue growth in millions of dollars.
Yeah.
For 2025, they're projecting $1.80 million. Okay, starting small. 2026 jumps to $5.42 million. 2027, $16.27 million. 2028, $48.83 million. 2029, huge leap to $146.4 billion.
Wow, that's exponential growth. What about 2030?
Interestingly, it levels off slightly in 2030, projected $106 million. Still a massive number.
That is quite a trajectory. What about profitability? Revenue is one thing, but are they expecting to make money?
They are. And the profitability metrics they project are remarkably consistent. They show a gross margin of 67%.
67%?
Yeah, 67% consistently across all those years. And an EBITDA margin that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization of 50%. Again, consistent across all years.
50% EBITDA margin consistently. In aerospace, that's highly unusual. Very strong, if achievable.
Agreed. And based on those margins, they project the total EBITDA generated just between 2025 and 2030 to be, wait for it, $1.225 billion.
Okay. Let's pause there. $1.225 billion in cumulative EBITDA over 6 years, starting from just $1.8 million in revenue.
That's what the projection says. So if you connect that back to the initial $5 million investment they're seeking now.
The implied ROI is astronomical.
The pitch deck calculates the projected ROI based purely on that cumulative EBITDA as 24,500%.
24,500%. Okay. Anyone listening who's an investor is probably raising an eyebrow right now.
And rightly so. I mean, those growth rates, those consistent high margins, 67% gross, 50% EBITDA, in a sector that often involves heavy R&D, complex operations. It begs the question, how?
Exactly. What's the magic sauce? Do the sources give any detail on their cost structure, their competitive advantages, anything that would make those kinds of margins plausible? Because that's not typical.
That's the thing. The sources present these bold numbers, but they don't really drill down into the unit economics that would support them. Like, they mention a goal of getting over 2,500 member businesses by 2026 and having nearly 5,000 subscriptions currently across different price tiers.
Okay, so there's a membership base.
Right. But to justify that kind of ROI, you'd really want to see the math, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Average revenue per member, customer acquisition costs, churn rates, things like that.
Absolutely. Without that granularity, these numbers, while exciting, feel very aspirational. Targets, not guarantees.
Precisely. And it's probably why they include that standard but important securities disclaimer.
Yes, the reality check.
Essentially, shares involve a high degree of risk and should only be considered by persons who can bear the risk of the loss of their entire investment.
Standard, but crucial context for numbers like those. High potential reward often comes with high risk.
Definitely something for potential investors to weigh carefully. But let's look at the broader market context they use to support these ambitions, because the underlying industry trends are powerful.
Okay, what market growth are they citing?
Well, beyond their own member growth projections, they point to massive increases in global drone flights, predicting a jump from around 679 million in 2025 for over 2.8 billion in 2030.
Huge increase in drone activity.
Yeah. And satellite launches, too, expected to grow from about 336 in 2025 to 825 in 2030. So the whole pie is getting much, much bigger.
That context is important. They're riding a wave or planning to.
Right. And they have a plan for future funding beyond this initial $5 million round. They intend to file for a Reg Tier 2 offering in Q3 2025.
Red J Tier 2. Okay, so aiming to raise more capital, potentially up to $75 million under current rules, and from the general public too, not just accredited investors.
Exactly. Broadening the investor base. They're aiming to raise $15 million through that Reg J.
And where are those funds earmarked?
Primarily for more advanced AI software development with Versus AI, and for bolstering those operations and launch control capabilities we talked about. So investing back into the core tech and infrastructure.
Makes sense. Building out the platform. Now, you mentioned branding earlier. How does that fit into their growth story?
They really emphasize brand power. The sources make this interesting point about how, ever since the 60s, companies have cleverly attached their brands to space missions to capture the public's imagination.
Right, the Tang effect almost.
Kind of. And they even quote Elon Musk on this.
Oh, what's the quote?
Musk said, "I wanted to inspire the public about the possibility of something new happening in space as part of a larger vision for spreading humanity to other planets." It highlights that strategic aspect.
Yeah.
It's not just engineering, it's inspiration, it's branding.
Capturing hearts and minds as well as market share.
Exactly. And then the source hits you with this really pointed question.
Yeah.
It asks, if you talk to a 24-year-old today, say from Ohio, about space travel, who do they mention first? Is it NASA? Or is it Elon Musk? Or SpaceX?
Yeah, that's a powerful point. For many younger people, it probably is Musk or SpaceX.
And the source just calls that branding mission accomplished. It really drives home how potent vision and consistent messaging can be, especially when you're building a new market.
A very telling observation about perception and influence in this new space age.
So wrapping this all up, if we recap this deep dive, Satellite Alliance is essentially positioning itself as this vital connector, this bridge, in what they see as a super exciting but still pretty fragmented drone and space industry.
Right, providing structure, services, a platform for growth.
Exactly. All within what they're calling the golden age of LEO. It's a bold play to organize a rapidly expanding frontier.
It really is. And stepping back from the pitch deck specifics, looking at their overall ambition, democratizing access to everything from, 20 feet above ground with drones up to 250 miles with satellites.
Yeah.
It really makes you think. Their vision is humans and robots will go to the stars together. If they or companies like them succeed in making air and spaceflight truly widespread and accessible, what does that actually look like? Beyond just the business opportunities, what are the real societal implications when accessing that frontier becomes, perhaps, almost routine? It's a pretty profound question to consider, isn't it?
That's a genuinely thought-provoking place to leave it. What does that future truly hold? We'll definitely be watching this sector closely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Satellite Alliance and the future unfolding in the drone and space economy. We hope it gives you plenty to think about regarding where all this might be headed.